When it comes to consent, there are 5 things every educator, parent and guardian needs to know. My name is Paul Ninnis and I'm the Managing Director of Real Talk. Every year we speak to tens of thousands of students about sex and relationships. There are 5 things about the topic of consent that I would love to suggest are crucial and are often overlooked. Firstly, start early, start simple. Ask young people what is consent. Many young people don't really get the basics, so ask what they know first. In short, consent is an agreement, a yes freely given. It is important to understand that the concept of consent needs to be introduced in primary school or even earlier, long before the discussion of sexual consent begins. It starts with teaching young people protective behaviours and body awareness. In simple terms, it is my body, I can say no. Even for teenagers, keep it simple. An absence of a yes means that someone has not consented. Sexual activity without consent, or if someone is unable to consent, is harmful and actually against the law. Secondly, consent and respect go together. Consent is not a standalone topic. There are some popular videos that make consent simple by comparing it to drinking tea or riding a bike. Being simple is good, but we must be careful not to inadvertently teach the wrong thing. You see, consent is super important, but it is not the only consideration. To teach it as a standalone principle or to suggest that it is everything is actually dangerous and can perhaps even foster unhealthy outcomes. Put simply, if John wants to perform a sexual act on Sally, and Sally consents, it doesn't necessarily mean this is a good idea for John or Sally. The act can still be harmful or perhaps even illegal. You see, Christians and many other traditions believe people have an extreme dignity. Because we have dignity, we deserve love. Because we deserve love, we show respect. Because we show respect, consent is super important. We show respect by prioritizing consent. When consent is taught, it needs to be taught as a way to show respect for self and for others. When consent is not subject to the more important principles of dignity, love, and respect, it can easily become the tail that wags the dog. The third topic that is super important to consent is pornography. This is my biggest beef with any dialogue on sexual consent. You cannot teach about sexual consent without teaching about the dangers of porn. Porn is seen by almost every young person and usually long before they make sexual debut. It is consumed in massive amounts and watched by most teenage males daily or weekly. Porn videos almost always misrepresent consent or lack it entirely. Additional to this, porn separates sex from intimacy. It treats people like objects and reinforces gender imbalance and male entitlement. It is by far the most corrosive curriculum and toxic training on sexual relationships, and it is the dominant educator on sexual matters. Fourthly, be understanding. This will take time. This topic is tricky. Nothing justifies sexual assault, rape, or mistreatment of any kind. We as a country need to ramp up the conversation and change the education, but culture change takes time. In the absence of healthy rites of initiation, fumbling your way through sexual encounters has become almost like a rite of passage. I remember a few years ago, a footy player after one state of origin rugby league match, when discussing the team's scrappy win in the post-match interview, said, "It was a bit like losing your virginity. It wasn't very nice, but we got the job done." This is the kind of role model our young men have been looking up to. Adding to this, young people are sexually curious and deep down they just want to belong. They want to do what they think their peers are doing. Social media is like peer pressure on steroids. Throw in porn, hormones, alcohol, drugs, and the waters of consent have been totally muddied. Millions of young people are swimming in a sea of confusion. Let's make sure we don't just point the finger. It's time to clean up the ocean. Lastly, we need to be empathetic listeners when consent issues arise. We always need to be people-focused and realise that a person's sexuality is core to their personhood. When discussions of topics happen, we sometimes miss the individual. Nobody deserves to be mistreated. We need to make sure we are empathetic. For those watching this who have been hurt, I am sorry. If you've been through this personally, that must have been really hard for you. You deserve to be heard. What happened to you should never have occurred. It was not right, it was not fair, and you didn't deserve it. Just a few hours ago, I sat down and listened to a young lady who had sex for the first time whilst under the influence of alcohol and didn't consent and can barely recall what happened. It changes you when you hear a person's story, because it's their story and you see the impact it can have on someone's life. For educators, parents and young people alike, I want to encourage you. This is one of those moments where we stand at the crossroads. We all have a part to play in changing our culture for the better.